Hey everyone, Judicial Watch President Tom Fitton here with our weekly update on social media. Thank you as always for joining us. So much happening this week, and the Biden scandal, the Epstein scandal, I guess it's kind of a Biden scandal too, but the Epstein scandal continues to dog the Trump administration, and it all began with a memo that I thought was ill-advised, telling American citizens, a memo that was leaked, unsigned initially, by the Justice Department and the FBI, that told American citizens that, by the way, there's nothing else to be done on Epstein, and you can't have any of the additional evidence that we may have that hasn't been released yet, that provided the basis for our conclusion. So Americans reacted quite negatively, and the polls are upwards of 80% of Americans want the Epstein records released. Now, President Trump has been resistant to this Epstein issue because he's been of the belief, and it looks like he had good reason to be of the belief now, given recent events, that there's information in there that was planted or manufactured or being misused to try to target and smear him. And not only that, but he's concerned that other American citizens could be targeted and smeared as well. And he talked about this issue earlier this week, and I think it's number 25. Let's go to 25.
No, she's given us just a very quick briefing, and in terms of the credibility of the different things that they've seen. And I would say that, these files were made up by Comey, they were made up by Obama, they were made up by the Biden, we went through years of that with the Russia hoax, with all of the different things that we had to go through. We've gone through years of it, but she's handled it very well. And it's going to be up to her. Whatever she thinks is credible, she should release.
Yeah, and so over the weekend, he had a bit of a crisis at the Justice Department and FBI because Kash Patel and Dan Bongino, or people close to them, were attacking Pam Bondi and the Justice Department over this memo, a memo that they both signed up on, or signed off on. And Dan was threatening to quit, the credible reports are. Evidently, he hasn't quit. He's still at the FBI. But it was a crisis for the agencies. And the president has been trying to move past it. But Republicans in the House want the documents released. Speaker Johnson suggested he wants the documents released. So I don't think there is any moving past it. And I think the way to deal with it is to release the information that would be releasable under law through the Freedom of Information Act. And of course, Judicial Watch already has a major lawsuit in this regard, as I discussed last week, the day after the memo said that there'll be no more documents to be released. The Justice Department was telling the court in our case that, in fact, they were reviewing and considering the release and searching for records responsive to our FOIA request for the Epstein materials for possible release. So a very confusing situation to Americans. And then on top of everything else, the president was subjected to a smear operation through the Wall Street Journal that published an allegation that Trump sent a letter to Epstein that was like typed out and had some very odd language in it that was not Trumpian at all, with a signature over a picture of a cartoon picture of a naked woman. And Trump said, this is just garbage. It's a fake letter. And the Wall Street Journal ran it anyway. And so Trump, in response, he's just furious with the whole thing. He told Pam Bondi the other day, go to any grand jury you need to go to and start getting the courts to unseal particular records about the Jeffrey Epstein issue, because evidently there are records that are under seal that haven't been released yet or can't be released yet. So that's kind of where we stand. And, as I said before, there is a way forward. Release the records under FOIA. And I put out this statement the other day, and it still holds true And it will hold true forevermore until we get all the Epstein records. Let's run that video.
What number?
Oh, it's the where I'm wearing the red shirt. I'm sorry. So I have a simple solution to the Epstein controversy facing the Trump administration. Judicial Watch has a federal Freedom of Information Act lawsuit for the Epstein records. The Justice Department just told a court in our case last week that they're still searching for and reviewing FBI, DOJ, Epstein records. Give Judicial Watch the Epstein records. Produce what they can produce under law. Tell the American people why they are withholding any information, if indeed that's what they decide to do. But get the legal process in place so the American people have confidence that all the records possible that can be released under law are being released. Simple plan. Let's get it done. So I'm hoping the White House is paying attention. I'm hoping the Justice Department and the FBI are paying attention. Certainly, it's not for want of shouting from the mountaintops. I was on a series of programs this week trying to educate the American people about this process for releasing government records. I was on Newsmax. I was talking to Sean Spicer. I was talking to C-SPAN. Of course, I did Steve Bannon's program as well, and then OANN. Let's go to my appearance with Rob Schmidt. Play a portion of that, number 30 from Newsmax.
Your reaction to the contention from Dershowitz that there's just not a lot there, the courts are withholding documents. Go ahead.
Well, maybe, but that contention can be tested by, as he points out, by releasing the information. And it's my advice to the administration is to follow the FOIA law, respond to our FOIA lawsuit with records as soon as they're able. We were just in court, and they told the court that they're still reviewing records about Epstein from both the FBI and Justice Department. They didn't say when they're going to be released or if they're withholding anything. And, that was the only detail. They're still looking and reviewing. And they just have to move more quickly on that to put some of these questions to bed. You're never going to convince everyone.
No.
You can't put out a memo. And then I went to Sean Spicer's program. Sean is the former spokesman for President Trump from the first term. He has a great little show. It was a great interview. I encourage you to watch the full interview because we talked about a variety of topics. But I specifically talked about Epstein with him just the other day, segment number 31. And, on the transparency side, I would err on the side of transparency. There's material that obviously is not going to be made public one way or the other. And I'm not going to prejudge what that material might be, but we've been around the block long enough to know there's some material that we will never see and may not, and it would be inappropriate for us to see. But they've kind of put a complete stonewall down on the release of any records, at least through this official memo that was signed off on by the leadership of the FBI and Justice Department. They got to lift that veil of secrecy and start erring on the side of disclosure. And I know the president's concerned that there may be people who had, incidental contact with Epstein or business contact with Epstein. And, it's not fair to put their names out there because, you can't have guilt by association. Well, that's a legitimate concern. But the American people should figure it out. In the end, yes, they can make their defenses. Many of these people are public figures anyway. They're big boys. They can do what they need to do to defend their reputations. And then, of course, I was on C-SPAN, which is always a more interesting program. I'm always a little hesitant to do C-SPAN because it means I have to sit there and listen to a bunch of callers attacking me, typically. But there are a lot of callers who are supportive of Judicial Watch. And plus, it's an opportunity to educate people, some of whom don't want to be educated. Here's my appearance on C-SPAN talking about Epstein as well, number 32. And he was killed, either by his own hand or someone else. And the American people aren't persuaded that the answers have been put out there, and I don't think everyone's convinced. I wish I could say, yeah, I'm convinced he committed suicide. I think that's probably most likely, but I'm not convinced it's the answer.
I want to share something that Laura Loomer said about this investigation. As reported by Politico, she says there should be a special counsel appointed to do an independent investigation of the handling of the Epstein files so that people can feel like this issue is being investigated and perhaps take it out of AG Pam Bondi's hands, because I don't think that she's been transparent or done a good job handling this issue. First, Tom, do you agree that there should be a special counsel? And second, do you think that the Attorney General has still has your confidence as Attorney General, or should she step down?
No, I don't think she should step down. I've long been of the view that politically sensitive investigations like this should not reside within the Justice Department and FBI. I don't trust either agency institutionally, and I've said this publicly and about other sensitive investigations that should be taking place. The president should be running them. He should be appointing prosecutors and investigators that report to him in the White House. Maybe they can use other law enforcement that don't have the apparent conflicts of interest that the Justice Department and FBI do to investigate matters such as this, a presidential prosecutorial investigative unit. And whether you want to call it a special counsel or a presidential prosecutor, but Epstein, lawfare, auto pen gate, whatever you want to call it, I don't think the Justice Department and the FBI have the confidence of the American people to get to the bottom of it. And then I was on with our friends over at OANN, Dan Ball, who was energetically questioning me about the Epstein issue.
There's no files? There is files? We can't release them? You can't release nothing? What's going on?
Well, they're not listening to me, which I've been doing Judicial Watch has been doing is literally through court encouraging transparency. We sued not only for the victims' files, but prior to that, we have a lawsuit for all the Epstein records. And what was really strange, Dan, is that they were leaking this memo that says no Americans are going to get any more information about Epstein. The next day, they're at the court telling the court in our case that they're still reviewing and searching for DOJ and FBI records about Epstein. And my solution is pretty simple. Release the records through this FOIA lawsuit that Judicial Watch has. Why? Because that process guarantees accountability for the records that are being released and explanations for the records that are being withheld. And so the American people will have an idea how many records there are, what's being withheld, if any, and why, where do they search for the records. That typically comes out through a FOIA lawsuit.
Right.
Just proceed normally. Don't send out any more weird memos, talking about evidence that no one. So you get the point. And we'll see what happens. The president, as I said earlier, authorized the Attorney General to begin seeking court permission to release material that would be impossible to release without court permission, such as grand jury materials. I don't know what that covers necessarily ultimately, but I can tell you what Judicial Watch is doing. We have the Freedom of Information Act lawsuit for all Epstein records. We have a second Freedom of Information Act lawsuit we filed on the death or for records concerning Virginia Giuffre, who was one of Epstein's most well-known victims. And so this process is continuing. I mean, the federal government is in court right now, the Justice Department, over our request for FBI and Justice Department records on Epstein. So either the records are going to be released or they're not going to be released, but either way, it's going to be a process through which the government will be held accountable under law. And so I would recommend, and I will say it once, I'll say it again, that they just start following the transparency law. FOIA is your friend to get beyond this, because you're going to get Congress, I suspect. I was very surprised last week to see, or this week, I guess, Mike Johnson do something or say something I thought he was going to, that was completely opposite from what I thought he was going to say. I thought he was going to say, oh no, we don't want Maxine, I'm sorry what her name is now. Maxwell, excuse me, her last name, Maxwell, the woman who's in jail now, Epstein's former associate, testifying before Congress. He said, oh yeah, I'd be in favor of that. And he called on the president, or he called on the administration to release all the Epstein records. And, I do know Speaker Johnson well enough to know that's a position that he's taking that's based on the public overwhelming his colleagues with calls for Epstein records. So that tells you where the public is, that Speaker Johnson immediately said, we got to start releasing the information. So it's going to come out. And, the question is it going to come out in a process that reassures the American people that things are being done properly? And I would submit our court lawsuit, and maybe I'm not trying to be self-promoting here for Judicial Watch, although why not? We're paying for this microphone, right? But it's a key way to ensure the American people that at least the rule of law is being applied to the release of the records. No more like leaks, no more binders being dropped. I think that's just the wrong approach because it doesn't allow for people to get full answers about what's being withheld and where the records were reviewed and where they were searched for and other issues related to their production. So it's really a simple solution. And I've been highlighting online, I say it's a simple plan to get these records released. Now, does it mean politically the issue is going to go away for the president or it will go away for the administration? I don't know. All I know is that the American people have a right to the records. And you can't go wrong releasing records and being transparent. And the president's instinctively one of the most transparent, I think he is the most transparent president in American history. So I would encourage him to follow Judicial Watch's lead, take advantage of this Freedom of Information Act lawsuit. And of course, the Justice Department and the FBI are supposed to release records under the law because it's required, and just do what the law requires. So this Epstein mess is, as I said, it is a mess. It's a bit of a crisis for the administration because there's so much criminality associated with the targeting of Trump, and Trump would argue he's been doing all sorts of good things, and some of which is tremendous. As a conservative, I'm all excited. As someone who supports the rule of law, we're all excited about his efforts to control the border and shut down the border invasion, which has effectively happened. And because of actions by his Justice Department and FBI, I think ill-advised actions, he's got this scandal on his hands. And it may be unfair, but it's life. And he's got to deal with it. And thankfully, Judicial Watch has a lawsuit that will provide the people answers, if the government follows my lead and Judicial Watch's lead, to some of the questions they have about Epstein. And so one of the big issues, as I said, out there that the left media doesn't want to talk about is the pardon scandal related to Joe Biden. Now, as you remember, he pardoned lots of people, including his family members, including Dr. Fauci, including General Milley, including the January 6 hoaxers on the January 6 committee, like the Schiffs of the world, et cetera. And I'll talk more about Schiff later. And some of those pardons are, in my view, null and void because they're pardons about nothing. They don't reference any crimes. They just talk about a time frame and the individuals getting the pardons being given pardons for anything they may have done in the last 10 years or so. Well, that's not appropriate, and it's not a legitimate pardon. It provides no guidance for anyone trying to enforce the rule of law. It provides no guidance for judges. And if I were President Trump, I would direct the Justice Department or whoever he has investigating these scandals to proceed as if the pardons are null and void, and let the defendants, if the defendants in the end of any investigation happen to be beneficiaries of such a pardon, let them raise it in the court. But it can't stop Trump from enforcing the rule of law. And there have been more stories. The New York Times put a story out this week trying to, essentially it was a leak from the Biden gang trying to get ahead of the confirmation, because you've heard about the AutoPen scandal. The scandal uncovered by our friends at the Oversight Project found that Biden used his AutoPen for a significant part of, for significant, let's put it this way, I think the only pardon they've confirmed or seemingly confirmed was signed by Joe himself was for his son Hunter. Everything else was auto-penned. Now there are other executive actions he took that were auto-penned as well. And an auto-pen isn't necessarily illegal in terms of its use, but it would be inappropriate and arguably in violation of the law for an individual to use the auto-pen, affixing Joe Biden's signature without sufficient authorization or permission. And that's what was confirmed in terms of the pardons in large measure by this New York Times piece. Let's go to that PDF. It's a big, long story. I guess the PDF I have is 14 pages, so it's a long story. Now, Biden interviewed the New York Times, and he says, "Oh, I did all the pardons." Of course, Biden isn't a credible witness, because the story itself confirmed that at best he was willing to say, not under oath, that he told his people that he was agreeable to the pardons that were being talked about. But there's no record of his authorizing the pardon. He didn't sign off. He didn't send an email. All it is secondhand information from his top staff. Joe authorizes the pardon. And that ain't good enough as far as I'm concerned. He says, "I made every decision," but there's no sufficient record he made the decision. The Times has reviewed several dozen emails, of course, which haven't been made public yet, which discuss each of the major grants of clemency that were recorded by an AutoPen near the end of Mr. Biden's term. Those that were, and they haven't seen everything, of course, because it was a modified limited hangout by the Biden gang, but those that were reviewed by the Times show that the Biden White House had a process to establish that Biden had orally made decisions in meetings before the staff secretary, Stephanie Feldman, who managed use of the AutoPen, would have clemency records put through the signing device. They really didn't have a process. It was, hey, I talked to the boss. He said we can pardon someone. So I don't know why they think that's a process. That's not a process. And one of the significant areas, or one of the significant group of pardons, Biden had a late night meeting, and this is how it's described. Emails show that Mr. Biden added the preemptive pardons for his family at a January 19th meeting. They also suggest that he changed some of his thinking. The summary of the first meeting said Mr. Biden had decided to grant a pardon to Don Singleton, a former Democratic governor of Alabama who was convicted in 2006 of federal corruption charges. The summary of the second said the president decided to rescind his approval, and then he changed his mind after he was lobbied for James Clyburn, who was a friend of his from South Carolina. Biden kept his aides until nearly 10 p.m. to talk through such decisions, according to people familiar with the matter. And by the way, simultaneously with these stories coming out, the Biden gang is taking the Fifth Amendment up on the Hill that's investigating issues like this, specifically the use of the AutoPen. The emails show that an aide to Mr. Siskel sent a draft summary of Mr. Biden's decisions at that meeting to an assistant to Mr. Zients, who was the chief of staff. You don't know who the chief of staff was to Biden. If you want to know what's so corrupt about this city, you know who the chief of staff is to Trump, don't you? Susie Wiles. Everyone knows it. Did you know who the chief of staff to Biden was? I barely knew his name, Jeff Zients, Z-I-E-N-T-S. Did you know it? My guess is many of you never heard his name before. One of the most important people in the federal government, the media protected him from having to answer any questions, practically speaking, about the crazed Biden administration. The assistant forwarded to Mr. Reed and Mr. Zients, who was another official, asking for their approval, and then sent a final version to Ms. Feldman, copying many meeting participants and aides at 10:28. 3 minutes later, Zients hit reply all and wrote, "I approve the use of the auto pen for the execution of all the following pardons." So that's how people like Fauci, Milley, etc. were pardoned by his chief of staff. He approved it. Not he, the big guy. He, the big guy's chief of staff. So it's really quite incredible. And it further suggests the pardons are null and void. I mean, the challenge for those of us concerned about this process is that my general understanding is the courts have said that you don't need to have even a pardon signed in order for it to be valid. And other parts of the story reference that he pardoned entire groups of people subject to particular sentencing laws that he wanted them to be waived. He wanted to commute their sentences or otherwise protect them from having to serve and it was a big list of names. And he didn't sign off on the names. Even after he authorized the so-called list of names, it was the lists were expanded and changed without Biden's knowledge. So, it seems to me that all of those issues should be subject to litigation. If I was the Justice Department. Now, kind of the worst pardons was for Hunter. Hunter's pardon, in part, was okay because he was pardoned for specific crimes that he had been convicted of or pled guilty to. But he also had a part of the pardon that applied to anything else he may have done since, I think, 2004 or 14? 2014. And that's the part that's invalid. So Judicial Watch filed a lawsuit for the Hunter Biden pardon records from the Justice Department just the other day. And excuse me, I'm pulling out the wrong press release. And I'll show you what it looks like on our screen here. I got my little computer. Okay, so this document looks like it's not the document I needed. This is the old one, guys, so resend it to me if you can. I will go to our press releases here and find it. Judicial Watch sues Justice Department for Hunter Biden pardon records. Filed a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit just, I guess it was about a week ago, for records and communications of the offices of Attorney General, Deputy General, Attorney General, and or Associate Attorney General, or their designated representatives about the pardoning of Robert Hunter Biden by his father, President Joe Biden. And of course, who was running the Justice Department at the time was Merrick Garland. So we want to know who knew what and when over at the Justice Department about the Biden pardon. Now, typically you can't sue the White House under FOIA, so we have to try to get these records a separate way. These records typically wouldn't be made available for some time as their presidential records, so there's a process in place that's going to prevent them being released publicly for some time unless the Trump administration starts releasing records pursuant to subpoenas from or just on their own to educate the public about what went on here, which we would encourage them to do. So it's up to Judicial Watch to try to figure out what we can get under law about this major scandal. I mean, there haven't been pardons like this really ever in the United States history in terms of the scope and wide-scale nature of the abuse. And on top of it, you've got and it's never happened before, legitimate questions about the authorization to make the pardons at all. Did Biden authorize the pardons? The New York Times story further confirms there's no record of that happening. There's a record of his chief of staff authorizing the pardons, but not of Joe himself. So that's a big deal. And Judicial Watch, once again, is in the middle of this big deal. And we're not stopping with just the pardons. We've got multiple federal lawsuits on Joe Biden's family corruption. I mean, we just had a lawsuit last week about the National Archives, records about Joe Biden's crime family activities when he was vice president, which of course bled through the Trump administration, because remember, Trump was impeached for blowing the whistle on Joe Biden's corruption as vice president with Ukraine. We have records, a lawsuit about the IRS investigation of Hunter Biden. And then, of course, we exposed how the CIA helped rig the 2020 election by helping those 51 intelligence advisors or officials, former, all of whom I think had national security clearances, try to mask the Hunter Biden laptop by calling it a likely Russia disinformation campaign. And the CIA rushed through approval of that in a way that was inappropriate and without much precedent. And Judicial Watch has the detail of that through our Freedom of Information Act lawsuits. So I appreciate that Congress is looking into things, and the great news is that your Judicial Watch is looking into things as well. And we're not, and of course we started this years ago. Congress is just starting it basically 2 months ago. I don't understand why they didn't investigate Joe Biden's mental capacities when he was the president. I was calling on them to do it, 25th Amendment and all of that. But they were afraid. They were afraid. Now he's out of office, they're not afraid. And look, I support more information generally, but I got to call it as I see it. You can always count on Congress to be a day late and a dollar short on most investigations. And we're seeing that with the pardon investigations and the use of the auto pen issue. I mean, the auto pen issue is kind of like a stalking horse for his mental capacities, right, and capabilities. That issue should have been investigated while he was president in order to protect the darn country. And it wasn't. So I suspect more lawsuits are coming from Judicial Watch. And I have good reason to suspect it because I'm president of Judicial Watch and I kind of know what's in the hopper. What else is happening this week? Oh, just before I came out, Tulsi Gabbard, who is the Office of Director of National Intelligence, runs that office, released and declassified information about the Russiagate smears of Trump. And the documents show that the Obama gang and Comey's FBI and CIA and the deep state intelligence agencies basically rushed through a process to create the fake news that the Russians wanted Trump to win. And what Tulsi's report or information shows is that what had happened was the initial report was the Russians didn't and couldn't interfere with our elections. They may have wanted to, but they wouldn't have had much impact. Certainly, they couldn't access our systems in a way to change the elections. But that wasn't what the Obama gang wanted. They wanted to smear Trump. And the documents show that they threw out essentially the document that was relatively straightforward because it didn't help their seditious, treacherous agenda, and they concocted another one, which was Russia, Russia, Russia. And we talked about this last week, where they laundered the Steele dossier through this subsequent analysis. The Steele dossier was the fake garbage created by the Clinton campaign, paid for in partnership with the FBI to smear Trump and to use it to undermine his administration and try to get him thrown in jail. And so the details of this document are really incredible. And thankfully, did you send me an updated thing?
Should be version 2.
In the mail? Give me a second, everyone. Let me look it up here. Can I go to Twitter on this? Are we signed into Twitter?
Stand by.
See, the dangers of giving me a computer is that I start using it. Sign in as Judicial Watch. Can I sign in as Judicial Watch?
Check your Gmail, it's sending you a new one.
So what happened is that I need the link to Tulsi Gabbard's material. So maybe you can post it online, post it on the screen. So there it is. So Tulsi posted a series of tweets that are very effective in describing what the issues are about. So let's go through it one by one because it's worth the time, because the media is not going to tell you about this, but I will. Let's scroll up so folks can see the first graphic there. So the creation of the Russia hoax, as I described, real intel assessment, Russia and criminal actors did not impact recent U.S. election results by conducting cyber attacks on infrastructure. As I noted, that was the initial conclusion. Okay, and that happened shortly before Trump won. This was around September of 2016. Trump wins. They have a Obama gang meeting with Obama in the White House on December 9th, and they literally meet to plan the Russia hoax. So Obama ordered a new investigation or new summary of the fake information there on the right. IC begins outlining new assessment to claim election was hacked. And the day before, you know how we know something happened? The day before, on December 8th, the IC pulled the product about how the Russians didn't do anything at the requests of the FBI. So they create this intelligence assessment that's fake. They immediately start leaking it and essentially weaponize it in order to undermine and destroy the Trump administration. So let's go down a little bit. Let's go to the next tweet. So this was the initial consensus. We are working with CIA on a presidential daily brief submission on the threat. The thrust of the analysis is that there is no indication of a Russian threat to directly manipulate the actual vote count. Later on, September 9th, we agree with Russia probably, and this is the line they agree with that was going to be in the presidential daily brief. Russia probably is not and will not trying to influence the election by using cyber means to manipulate computer-enabled election infrastructure. And then Clapper talking points. We assess this is just before that infamous meeting with Obama. We assess that foreign adversaries did not use cyber attacks on election infrastructure to alter the U.S. presidential election outcome this year. We have no evidence of cyber manipulation or election infrastructure intended to alter results. So they go down. Let's go down to the next one. They pulled the brief. This is what it was to say before it was pulled. Russian and criminal actors did not impact recent election results by conducting malicious cyber activities against election infrastructure. Okay, and there you have this is the smoking gun. Based on some new guidance, we are going to push back publication of the Presidential Daily Brief. It will not run tomorrow and is not likely to run until next week. And the next day, as Tulsi highlights, Brennan, Clapper, all the rest met at the secret meeting. So look at the gang that's there. The participants include Susan Rice. Biden was asleep, I guess. He wasn't there. John Kerry, Victoria Nuland, Adam Schussman from Treasury, Loretta Lynch, Justice Department, Mary McCord, Justice Department, Jay Johnson, top DHS official, the chief of staff at the time, Dennis McDonough, Neil Eggleston, who was type White House counsel, top lawyer, DNI, James Clapper, Andrew McCabe for the FBI, the corrupt Andrew McCabe, the corrupt John Brennan for the CIA, etc. Ben Rhodes from White House, I think he was National Security Advisor, or was he National Security? No, that was Jake Tapper. I forget what Ben Rhodes' position was. The IC is prepared to produce an assessment per the president's request. So Obama got the operation going to get Trump. Let's go down to the next tweet. And this was the fake news reports. Though Russia has long conducted cyber spying on U.S. agencies, companies, and organizations, this presidential campaign marks the first time Russia has attempted through cyber means to interfere in, if not actively influence, the outcome of the election. Completely opposite to what they said before. It was all made up. It all began leaking immediately after the meeting and contemporaneous with it. Let's go to the next one. And of course, they used the Steele dossier. And someone said, why did we use the Steele dossier? That's essentially what that email says. The Steele dossier was a factor in the Obama intelligence assessment. So they used this fake dossier to try to destroy President Trump. I mean, this is important. And there's enough here, given the various testimonies and the conspiracy that I think continues to this day, to warrant a fulsome criminal investigation. And I'm pleased the agencies are releasing this info, but this can't be the end of it. We got to go to the punishment phase, the accountability phase for the warfare against Trump. And I found something very interesting in the documents that we uncovered here, or that were produced. Of course, we had asked for records like this many, many times. So you can be sure our pressure helped get some of these records out. This is from a FBI analyst. Listen to this paragraph. We believe it is worth noting that maybe I should bring it up a little bit more here so you can see it. See, it's from the blacked out name, Intelligence Analyst, Technology, Cyber Intelligence Unit, Cyber Intelligence Section. And so let's look at number 2 there. We believe it is worth noting that in an extremely close race, it is certainly possible that a very targeted cyber attack aimed at manipulating votes could lead to a change in the legitimate results and affect the outcome of the election. As an example, the votes in a swing county in a swing state could potentially be slightly altered, thus resulting in the Electoral College votes of a particular state to go toward one particular individual, thus tipping the entire election in their favor. I.e., in the 2000 election, the results in Florida essentially were decided by 1 or 2 counties. Although this is unlikely, it certainly remains a possibility, and one that can't be discounted due to the high impact, even with the disjointed nature of U.S. election technology. So here we have, just before the 2016 election, an FBI intelligence analyst sharing with other top officials in the United States government that, yes, our election systems are subject to potential hacking by foreign actors in a way that can affect the outcome of the election. And it seemingly is easy to do. You don't need to do it nationally. All you need to do, go into a select county or select state, and you can get it done. Now, if you made that allegation, as you recall, around 2020, you were sued, you were disbarred, you were targeted for censorship, you were threatened with jail. In fact, you probably you could go to jail already if it weren't for the election changing the leadership of the Justice Department. So these people in 2016 acknowledged that our election systems are susceptible to being hacked. And if we said the same thing in 2020, or even asked the question, or expressed concern about it, they tried to jail and destroy you. Yeah, so I'm ticked off about this Russia stuff. But we already knew that they had been doing this in large measure. This is more proof beyond a shadow of a doubt. I have no doubt. But this is really outrageous here. It shows you how dishonest our whole system is, isn't it? I mean, not only the Justice Department was trying to jail you for thinking like this, even though that was standard analysis. You had the big tech platforms censoring you. Heck, we still get throttled and censored over this garbage, raising questions about 2020. We still get censored online. Judicial Watch does. I've been censored repeatedly over the issue. So everyone involved in this should be criminally investigated. And I've observed before, Obama knew, Biden knew, Hillary knew, Clapper knew, Schiff knew, Comey knew, McCabe knew, and of course Obama did it. And no, it's not too late to impeach Obama. They impeached Trump, proceeded with impeachment proceedings against Trump after he was president. They should do the same for Obama. In the least. I'm so mad I don't know what I'm going to talk about next. Something that's not going to make me any happier, which is we mark the anniversary of the president's near assassination in Butler, Pennsylvania last year. And we also mark the anniversary of the FBI covering it up every day since. There hasn't been one record that's been released in response to the Butler anniversary. And, you know, I was looking back at, you know, our coverage of Butler, and what happened on that day was so outrageous. Obviously, the president was nearly killed. An innocent man was murdered. 2 other citizens were injured, and, you know, thousands traumatized. And it could have been prevented, and it exposed the Secret Service to be the disastrous organization that we've long highlighted here at Judicial Watch as being. And watch this video of my commenting on how they took Trump out after the shooting. Watch this.
Incredible video of Trump being removed by the Secret Service from the area where he just miraculously survived the shooting. Agents heroically defending his life with their bodies, all heroes. Of course, there are serious questions about some of those agents, whether they had the height, abilities, etc., to defend him adequately if things further had hit the fan. I also don't like how slowly they got him away from the area. I mean, you could see just frustratingly slow there, in my view. This is why Judicial Watch is conducting its own independent investigation. We have 20 FOIAs out there. We don't trust the FBI or the Secret Service or the Deep State or the Biden administration or Congress to do any of this. We're going to do the heavy lifting on our own.
And indeed, we got material from the Secret Service, from local authorities up in Butler, in Pennsylvania. We got some material from the Secret Service, but not about the underlying attack. And it's Judicial Watch that has been waiting patiently for the FBI because they said, oh, we've got an investigation going on. It's been a year. Release to us the records. It's been a year. Did crooks have any help? I doubt it. Or maybe they haven't even looked for it. I don't know what's going on. But the idea they can't release anything, I don't buy. And that's why we just sued in federal court for it. Judicial Watch announced today we filed the lawsuit. We asked for all records, including but not limited to investigative reports, interview summaries, letterhead memos, photos, audio-visual, database inquiries, interagency communications, and any other records which contain the central record system or cross-reference files related to Thomas Matthew Crooks. And you know what was interesting this week was there was a story about a SWAT team member up in Butler who arguably saved the president's life by firing his weapon in a way that prevented crooks from being able to continue to get shots off. And then I think finally the Secret Service sniper who, for whatever reason, didn't fire timely enough, finally did fire and kill him. At least that's what the thinking is. But we don't know for sure since so much little has been released. But what was interesting in the Post story was that there were 4 men around that facility, including crooks. So it wasn't just crooks, there were 3 other people who were noted by law enforcement as being in a place they weren't supposed to be, and who actually had resisted moving or avoided moving even when told to do so. So that was kind of interesting, don't you think? So this is why we sue, because we've got these questions and we're not getting answers. As I said, I don't trust the Secret Service. It's a disaster. You saw that video. Those poor women couldn't even handle their guns properly. I mean, has DEI gotten any better at the Secret Service? I don't think so. Has there been any accountability at the Secret Service? I don't think so. Certainly nothing sufficient. They made a big show of saying certain members of the Secret Service were put on administrative leave for a period of time. No one's been fired. And those who were targeted for the so-called punishment weren't the only people responsible. So the Secret Service is still a mess. I mean, the FBI is a mess necessarily. We already know that. And it's been a year and they haven't turned over one document under FOIA. And I'm tired of it. They almost killed Trump, almost got him killed, and we can't get any information from the FBI about the shooting? That's not appropriate. What did I say about it? No more delays, no more excuses. The FBI should release what it has on the man who tried to kill Donald J. Trump. Simple. And Pam Bondi should direct a full and immediate release of information about the Butler shooting. And Kash Patel should sign on to it as well. But time's a wasting. I mean, we sued Secret Service over at Department of Homeland Security for information about this. We have 2 lawsuits there. And then in August of 2024, we received records from the District Attorney's Office. They gave us the most detailed information about the actual shooting. Let's go see what they gave us. Oh yeah, they gave us photos of the shooter that hadn't been released before. We got body cam footage that had never been released before. I think we can show it to you here. Is it going to show up? Yeah. So you can see the body cam footage. Some of it was quite graphic, so I'm not going to play it outright, but we'll post the links below. And what else did we get? 2 photographs of Matthew Crooks, one of which I don't think anyone had seen before. This is the one I thought was interesting. Let me view it and put it up there. So look at how close they were to him. Close enough to see his phone. I mean, an odd-looking guy. You know, he's standing there with his skinny arms and everything, and all of these law enforcement couldn't get to him. Incredible. So we're going to keep on asking questions on all of these topics. Epstein, the lawfare against Trump, the disaster, lawless, reckless, out of control, uncontrolled Trump-Biden administration, the attempted killing of Trump. I don't know. I think all of this is kind of important, don't you? So stay tuned for more. So, you know, Judicial Watch is doing more than ever. And so what we try to do when we kind of increase staff are just look for the best that we can bring on to increase our capacities. And I'm pleased to report that we just hired, let me get the official release out, Sean O'Donnell. And Sean was a former EPA Inspector General, and he's joined our litigation team. He has tremendous, tremendous experience. And let me go to the press release about Sean, because, I mean, you know, when you hire someone, you kind of know they're impressive. Obviously, we reviewed his record and everything. But then I looked at the press release where we described it, and he's even better than I thought. And it's nearly perfect, his experience for our work, and you'll see here. He was Inspector General from 2020 to 2025, and then Trump got rid of a bunch of Inspector Generals, and he was initially hired under the first Trump administration. He was the lone voice in the EPA warning against fast money and careless spending. His reputation as a relentless fighter against fraud, waste, and abuse was earned, having taken the agency's Office of Inspector General from one that realized only $3 billion in annual monetary impact to one realizing over $2 billion in 2024. So Sean was Doge before Doge was even well known. I mean, he was Doge in during the in many ways during the Biden administration. I'm sure they love that. From 2020 to 2022, he was also acting Inspector General of the Department of Defense. So he was Inspector General for 2 major federal agencies at the same time. And the Department of Defense is, I think, the country's biggest federal agency. He led over 1,800 oversight professionals over at DOD, and his tenure resulted in $3.5 billion in civil and criminal cases, 330 reports, and at least $1.25 billion in potential benefit to the State Department. And prior to that, he was at the Justice Department, where he worked in the as a trial attorney and a prosecutor, pursuing fraud cases. He's expert on voting law as well, which is very helpful to Judicial Watch. And he recovered over $4 billion for the government through fraud cases and for fraud victims. So this is a major hire by Judicial Watch in terms of increasing our capacity to investigate and prosecute government corruption. We're happy to have Sean join the Judicial Watch team. His tremendous experience at the Justice Department as an Inspector General for both the EPA and the Defense Department is a perfect fit for Judicial Watch and should make all government officials who are corrupt very nervous. So great news to have Sean O'Donnell here with our already excellent team at Judicial Watch. We're your independent Justice Department. Who needs a special prosecutor when you have Judicial Watch, right? Just great, great stuff. Speaking of corrupt government officials, one of the worst out there is Adam Schiff. Yeah, I got confused because there's so many terrible, corrupt politicians. I literally went through 3 or 4 names, and I latched on to Schiff at the end. And he's been subject to a criminal referral for mortgage fraud. It's really quite a simple case. The letter here is, I don't know, do you all have it in the back? Here's the referral, dated May 27th, referring him to the Justice Department for a criminal investigation. He purchased a property in Maryland for $870,000. He entered into a Fannie Mae-backed mortgage agreement with a mortgage company for $610,000 at a rate of 5.625% for a term of 30 years. And he affirmed that that would be his principal residence. And then he reconfirmed that it was his principal residence a few times after that. But at the same time, Schiff took a homeowner tax exemption on a condo he owns in Burbank, California, also claiming that home as his primary residence for a $7,000 reduction off the first 1% property tax. And in 2023, a spokesman for Schiff asserted that Adams' primary residence is Burbank, California, and will remain so when he wins the Senate seat. Primary residence mortgages receive more favorable loan terms, including lower interest rates, than secondary residence mortgages. Essentially, your home, you get the lowest possible interest rate generally available, given your credit score. If you buy a vacation home, you pay extra because that's more than it's just an added risk having a second home in terms of the point of view of most banks. So you pay a premium. Lenders view secondary residence mortgages as significantly riskier. As a borrower is more likely to continue paying off a primary residence mortgage during any financial hardship. Interest rates on secondary residence mortgages are typically between 0.25% to 0.5% higher than their primary residence counterparts. However, this gap can widen depending on the lender. Mr. Schiff appears to have falsified records in order to receive favorable loan terms and also appears to have been aware of the financial benefits of a primary residence mortgage when compared to a secondary residence mortgage, as a spokesperson in 2023 told the media outlet CNN that his addresses have been listed as a primary residence for loan purposes because they are both occupied throughout the year and to distinguish them from a vacation property. But you can only have one primary residence. So this looks like to be mortgage fraud. And Schiff's response was very peculiar. And I commented on in this video. I don't know which number it is, but bring it up if you can.
The president today is accusing me of fraud. And the basis of his accusation is that I own a home in Maryland and I own a home in California. Big surprise. Members of Congress, almost all of them own more than one home or rent more than one home because we're required to be on both coasts. So he is using my ownership of 2 homes to make a false claim of mortgage fraud. But what really is going on here is this is done.
Look, he's dissembling here. It's not about whether he owns 2 homes. The question is whether he listed both homes in California and Maryland as primary residences. And if he did, it could be a violation of federal law, as is now being pursued by the Trump administration. The fact that he's being so dishonest about this suggests he may have done what he's accused of.
So do you trust Adam Schiff? I don't. he's kind of admitting through omission that he did what he's accused of doing. Maybe a defense available to him, I don't know. But he's got a terrible record on ethics, an abuser, a leaguer, a liar. And I don't use the term liar loosely. I want you to go back and look at all of my, you're not going to go back and do this, but I suspect if you went back and looked at all of my public commentary on government officials, including people that you think I hate or despise because of their evident criminality, I rarely use the term liar. Rarely. Schiff is a liar. Demonstrated 6 ways to Sunday. And so does he deserve the benefit of the doubt on this? No way, Jose. So I don't know what the Trump administration is going to do with this, but this is straightforward violation of law if what they allege is true. So Adam Schiff should be subject to criminal investigation, not only on this, but a whole host of other matters. But, the law is the law here. And when you have senior government officials violating it with seeming impunity, it's especially important that those in responsibility, who have the responsibility to enforce the law, take action to enforce it. So a lot happening. We've got before I go, we got an election. Let me start over on that. Next week, we have a federal court hearing on our lawsuit in Illinois to clean up the voting rolls there. Illinois' voting rolls are a mess, and it's one of 3 lawsuits we're currently litigating in federal court. We have 2 other lawsuits in Oregon and California. As I've said before, we've got 5 million names we've cleaned up from the rolls recently, thanks to Judicial Watch's litigation and legal actions. And Illinois is on our list because it's one of the worst states in terms of just not maintaining the rolls as federal law requires. You're supposed to take reasonable steps to clean up the rolls, and they aren't doing it in Illinois. So we'll see what happens at the hearing next week. Obviously, the left is lining up against us. Whenever we file these lawsuits, we're not only suing the government, but you have all these left-wing interest groups come in and try to attack our lawsuit as well. So it's David versus Goliath all the time when it comes to enforcing the rule of law on election integrity. So pray for wisdom and discernment by the judge in this case, that it allows us to proceed so that Illinois can have cleaner elections in the end because their rolls are cleaner. So with that, I'll be here next week. Maybe we'll find out what goes on next week at the hearing in a way that I can report to you. But in the meantime, have a blessed week, and God bless you, and God bless America.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like our video down below.